The night I found her, the rain was falling so hard it sounded like the sky itself was breaking apart. The streetlights flickered through the storm, turning the empty road into a blur of silver and shadow. I had just unlocked the door to my small apartment when I saw a figure sitting on the concrete steps outside my building. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when lightning cracked across the sky, the truth appeared in a single, unforgettable flash. She was sitting there, trembling. And she was wearing my shirt, and nothing else. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through 1,000 questions, none of them making sense. I had never seen her before. Yet the oversized gray shirt clung to her thin frame like it belonged there. The wind pushed strands of wet hair across her face, and her arms were wrapped tightly around her knees as if she was trying to hold herself together. But the thing I will never forget was the look in her eyes. Not fear, not shame, just exhaustion, the kind that only comes from surviving something the world should never have asked you to endure. Before we go further into this story, take a moment to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small acts that change lives, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them. Heart. I stepped closer carefully, unsure of what I was walking into. The rain soaked through my jacket as I approached, but she barely reacted. She looked up slowly, like someone waking from a very long nightmare. The shirt she wore was unmistakable, a faded gray one with a small tear near the collar. It was the shirt I had thrown away earlier that day in the dumpster behind the building. Suddenly, everything felt strange and fragile. The world had somehow taken something I had discarded and wrapped it around a human being who clearly had nothing left. Up close, I could see bruises forming on her arms, faint but undeniable. Her bare feet were red from the cold pavement, and her shoulders shook with quiet shivers. Yet she didn't beg, she didn't ask for help. She just sat there as if the rain and darkness were the only things left in her life. I opened the building door slowly and stepped aside. The hallway light spilled onto the steps, warm and yellow against the stormy night. She looked at it like someone staring at the entrance to another world. It took nearly a full minute before she stood up. Every movement seemed heavy, as if her body was learning how to trust gravity again. She walked past me without a word, leaving small wet footprints on the floor. I closed the door behind us, shutting out the storm that had swallowed the entire city. My apartment wasn't much. One bedroom, old furniture, a couch that had seen better days. But compared to the freezing rain outside, it might as well have been a palace. I handed her a blanket and pointed toward the couch. She wrapped it around herself instantly, her fingers gripping the fabric like it might disappear. Even then, she didn't speak. And somehow, the silence said everything. I made tea in the small kitchen, giving her space. Steam rose from the kettle, filling the apartment with warmth that the storm had stolen from the night. When I finally turned back toward the living room, she was sitting exactly where I had left her, holding the mug with both hands as if the heat itself was saving her life. That's when I noticed the shirt again. The sleeves were too long, covering half her hands. The fabric hung loosely over her shoulders. But somehow, in that fragile moment, it didn't look like something discarded anymore. It looked like armor. Over the next hour, pieces of the story began to reveal themselves. Not through long explanations or dramatic confessions, but through the quiet details that slipped through the cracks of silence. She had been running from a place that had slowly crushed every part of her life. A place where promises had turned into control, and control had turned into something darker. She had left with nothing. No bag, no phone, no plan. Just the desperate instinct to escape. Somewhere along the way, the rain had started. Cold, relentless, and unforgiving. She had walked for miles before seeing the dumpster behind my building. Inside it, she had found the gray shirt. Something dry, something warm, something that didn't ask questions. So she put it on. And kept walking until she couldn't anymore. That's how she ended up on my steps. In that moment, I realized something that shook me more than the storm outside. Sometimes survival isn't heroic. Sometimes it doesn't look brave or powerful. Sometimes survival looks like a stranger wearing a shirt someone else threw away. The following days were quiet but transformative. She stayed on the couch while I tried to figure out what the right thing to do was. There were moments when she would stare out the window for hours, watching people pass by on the street below. Other times she would simply sit with a cup of tea, as if relearning what peace felt like. Little by little, the tension in her shoulders began to fade. She started sleeping through the night. The bruises began to heal. And something remarkable began to happen inside that tiny apartment. Life slowly returned. I brought home groceries, extra clothes, and small things that made the place feel warmer. She helped clean and cook, moving carefully at first like someone afraid the world might collapse again. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was the way her eyes began to look different. The emptiness that had lived there on that rainy night slowly gave way to something fragile but powerful. Hope. Weeks later, on a calm evening when the sky finally looked peaceful again, she stood by the window wearing the same gray shirt. By then it had become her favorite thing to wear around the apartment. Not because it was fashionable, but because it reminded her of the night everything changed. The night she stopped running alone. And strangely, that shirt, once forgotten in a dumpster, had become a symbol of survival. Looking back, I realized how close our lives had come to never crossing paths at all. If I had taken a different route home that night, if the rain had stopped earlier, if the shirt had never been thrown away, she might never have stopped on those steps. And the world would have remained exactly the same. But kindness has a strange way of rewriting fate. Months passed, and the woman who once arrived trembling in the storm began rebuilding a life piece by piece. She found work at a small cafe nearby. She started laughing again. Real laughter, the kind that fills a room and makes you forget the darkness ever existed. And every now and then, she would still wear that gray shirt. Not out of necessity, but as a reminder. A reminder that even on the worst nights, when the rain feels endless and the world seems cruel beyond repair, a single act of compassion can become the turning point of someone's entire life. Before we reach the end of this story, I have a small request for you. If you've ever experienced a moment where a stranger's kindness changed your life, or if you believe that compassion can still exist in this world, please write the word kindness in the comments below. It helps spread a powerful message to everyone reading. And now, here is the part of the story that still moves me the most. 1 year later, on a peaceful evening, we walked past the same building steps where everything had begun. The sky was clear, the air calm, and the city looked nothing like the stormy night that had brought us together. She paused for a moment and looked down at the concrete where she had once sat alone in the rain. Then she smiled, not the fragile smile of someone barely holding on, but the confident smile of someone who had fought her way back to life. And for the first time, I realized something extraordinary. The girl who once wore my shirt because she had nothing left, now wore it because it reminded her how strong she truly was. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. Heart. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion create the biggest miracles. And sometimes, a simple gray shirt can save a life.